Greetings, happy January. Today I will be trying to answer the age-old fantasy lovers question of the last few years: is Fairyloot worth it in 2024? I subscribed to Fairyloot at the very beginning of this year. I only missed the month of January, so I'm not going to be talking about that book at all because I don't have it and I never received it. For a whopping almost $40 a month, US subscribers can receive one very beautiful special edition book that is supposed to be hand-curated by the Fairyloot team to be something that people really actually want to read, something that they're hyped about, and they get it in a beautiful edition. But are people actually excited about these books? That's the question. So today I'm going to be going through each of the books that I received throughout 2023 as part of the basic adult-only book subscription. I do not get the box because I don't need a bunch of extra crap that I don't care about. I just want the book. And I'm going to be talking about the actual quality of the special editions, the redesign of the covers, the actual book itself, whether or not it was something that people really wanted to read, whether it was something that has resale value, because honestly that's a big reason why a lot of people keep their Fairyloot subscriptions nowadays, is because the resale value for books that become really hyped up on the social media can be really high and can basically pay for your entire subscription. And I will say I'm not a huge fan of the fact that people are paying such large amounts of money for special edition books. But I do think in some ways it is a healthy thing for the book economy, and also if I am paying for the subscription out of my own pocket, I am not above reselling the books for market price. I mean, like, I can't really control the fact that people are willing to spend like $150 to $200 or even more for a special edition book, and it's just gonna sit on my shelf collecting dust because it's something that I didn't enjoy reading, and like I'm going to sell it, you know? So I can't deny that that is a big advantage of having a Fairyloot subscription in 2024. So the first book I received from my first ever Fairyloot subscription was The Adventures of Amina El-Sarafi. This is the February Fairyloot, and it follows a pirate named Amina who has had a long and storied career, and she ends up taking one last job with her crew to secure her family's fortunes. I'll be honest, I read like the first 15 pages of it and then decided it was not something that I wanted to slog through for almost 500 pages. Something about it, I was not vibing with it. It probably is not something I would have decided to read on my own. If I had just seen it in the bookstore or the library, I would not have picked it up. But overall, I would say that this was something people were pretty excited about, especially because it's one of the most beautiful editions that Fairyloot has done all year, in my opinion. The gold foiling on the cover is absolutely gorgeous. The intricacy, the detail. It is published by Harper Voyager, which means that it actually turned out to be good quality, which I will talk about in more detail later. The printing on the side is not just a direct copy of the cover, and it's not just a color gradient. It is super detailed and representative of the story and looks amazing on a shelf. The map on the end papers is spectacular. The full color illustration looks super vintage even, and you do get one character illustration, and then the embossing on the actual cover itself is pretty much a copy of parts of the cover, but I think anything in gold on dark background is going to look amazing, and there were no flaws in this. So I would say, as far as the actual production quality of this book, it was a 10 out of 10. And this is reselling for between $50 and $75 right now, so you would make a tiny bit of money reselling this one, but I think it's too beautiful to sell. I love having it on my shelf even if I never read it. Alright, March, we ended up with The Foxglove King by Hannah Whitten. I also did not read this one, and it wasn't something I was super excited about, but I think people overall were pretty happy with this selection. I think she has a lot of fans who were pretty happy to see this book. This follows a girl named Lore who escapes the catacombs in this kind of opulent and dazzling city, and she makes a living running poisons, and she gets entangled in this scheme with the king and with her protector, and kind of sounds like a standard YA adult fantasy crossover plot. I might pick this up at some point. It is just not high on my radar right now to read. As far as the cover, it's pretty good. I don't think it's as nice as Amina. We do get a little bit of metallic foiling, but otherwise it's a little dark and hard to see, especially from far away. I do like the dark kind of vintage flower detailing on the side pages. The character illustrations on the end papers are not amazing. They're a little dark. I get that this is a dark book, but there just doesn't seem to be very much detail, and they're pretty hard to see even in good lighting. There is a reversible dust jacket on this one, and it is just a character illustration, and normally I'm not a big fan of character illustrations on book covers, but I actually kind of like this one because it's a muted color palette and that just makes it different. And that book is also reselling for about $50, so you would make money on that one too. I'm not going to resell it for the moment because I might actually try reading it, but perhaps down the line. For March, we ended up with In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune. This is a very popular author, so I think overall some people were kind of excited about this, but I think overall it was kind of a meh selection because I think he writes kind of specialized fantasy that has a specialized fan group. It's not super broad, and none of his stuff is anything that I was like super interested in picking up, so I'm not planning on reading this, but it also does not have very good resale value right now. I think it's between $25 and $30, which is less than it cost, obviously, to have it as part of the subscription. The cover on this is really pretty. I do love nature scenes. I think it's a pretty average execution. There's nothing super amazing about it, but it's also not as ugly as some of the other ones that are coming up. The spraying on the edges is pretty much just a repeat of what's on the cover, but it is really pretty. And I think the end papers on this one are absolutely gorgeous. Whoever did the illustrations here, it really brings the scene alive and does actually kind of make me want to read the book only because of how vibrant this place looks. The foiling on the inside is pretty simple, but it's cute and I like the little robot. So overall, I would say that this was an acceptable execution of the actual design, but it was not my favorite of the year. Then we have the April book. Is that right? February, March? No, that was the April book. This is the May book. And this was probably my least favorite book that Fairyloot has done all year. This is called The Curse of Saints, and it's definitely one of those books, again, with the YA adult crossover, where there's no way that this should have been in the adult pick, maybe in the YA pick, but even then, it was not something that people were excited for. I did read this entire book, and it was pretty much just an average YA fantasy about some girl who is somehow more skilled than she really should be for her age, who gets sent to this other city to kind of uncover these mysteries, and she has this weird dark power, and she falls in love with the guy who's with her. I mean, it was very predictable, and nothing about it was super innovative or well executed, and neither was the design of this book. The cover is just some character illustration, which I said that I don't really like, and there's not really much detail. The back cover in particular is really boring, and then I just don't like the plain gradient on the sprayed edges. You know, if you're gonna do sprayed edges, do something a little bit more interesting, or just don't do them at all. The character illustrations on the end papers are fine. They are well done. I have no complaints or qualms with that. And the gold foiling on the gray is really beautiful, and I think that that was well done, and I think they should have just done something like that for the actual front cover. From what I've been hearing from people online, I don't think anyone really enjoys the character illustrations on the cover unless they're in some sort of unique style or they're just really well done. So I think that this was probably their least successful book of the year. Then we have Shanghai Immortal, and this was another book that no one was excited for, so we had 2 months in a row of kind of duds. And by this point, I started to hear a lot of online chatter of, is Fairyloot worth it? Should I cancel? I already used all my skips this year. So this is a story about a half vampire named Jing who hears about this plot to steal a priceless pearl from the king, and she decides that she's going to stop it. I did not read this, so that's about as much as I could glean from the cover. It's short enough that I might try it and see how I feel about it, but I don't feel like it received amazing reviews, and like I said, no one was really excited about this. And I don't necessarily need Fairyloot to only pick books that are super overhyped and that people are really looking forward to, because obviously I've read so many books that are underloved and are some of the best books that I've ever read, and I don't know why more people aren't talking about them. But I will say that at least if they pick a popular book that ends up not being as good as everyone thought it was going to be, it normally still maintains pretty good resale value, whereas something like this and the book in the month before are reselling for way less than the subscription, which is totally fine, but it does leave a little bit of a bitter taste in your mouth. And this is the first one of the year that was printed by Hotter Hotarscape in China, and their quality is questionable at best. The cover on this one is gorgeous, but the sprayed edges, you can see that there's this banding on the edges where it only looks normal if I like push the edges together all the way, but otherwise when it's sitting on a shelf you can see into the pages and it's bowed. There's this U bowing because they did not do it properly. Character illustrations on the inside are pretty standard, and the gold foiling as well on the actual cover itself is also standard, but anytime anything is printed by Hotarscape you get this weird bowing in the pages, and people even had like some of their pages falling out because they're just glued in and not stitched in like some of the better quality books. So this definitely was not worth $35 in my opinion, and pretty much anything that is printed by Hotarscape now in the future I just use a skip on that because it's not worth something that is not well executed. Then we had another Hotarscape book, Immortal Longings. People were actually really excited about this though because Chloe Gong is a pretty big author, but this book received some pretty bad reviews compared to some of her other series. And I did actually read this even though I did not like anything else that Chloe Gong has published, and funnily enough I enjoyed this way more than any of her other stuff, so I'm kind of in the minority there in terms of how I felt about it. I did not think this was an amazing book, but it was enjoyable and I didn't find it boring, and even though some things were kind of predictable, I thought the execution of the city as a character in this book was really well done. It's kind of that like cyberscape fantasy, and just the vibes were immaculate. This follows an exiled princess who enters this competition to receive a boon from the emperor, and with that boon she can do anything she wants, and it's kind of like the Hunger Games in that it's a televised competition, and so people are running through the city trying to kill each other while the public is watching. I love the cover on this one, but again, with the sprayed edges, they are not very well done, and it's just a repeat of what's on the cover. They should have just done some sort of like abstract light kind of design that represented the city, but that did not have a poorly sprayed version of the cover on it, so I did not like that. The illustrations on the end papers, again, pretty hard to mess up. They look good, and I did like the sketch of the character in the foil on the front cover. I thought that that was different and unique, and we had not seen anything like it this year, so I did like that. Then we have Forged by Blood. This was a book that I know a lot of people skipped, but I thought it sounded interesting enough that I decided not to skip it. And yet again, it was another book that was really more YA than it was adult. This could have gone in the YA box with literally no issues. A 16-year-old could have easily read this and it would have been completely fine. I did read this. I thought it was okay. It's about a girl who wants to kidnap this prince in order to reclaim justice for her mother who was killed by the prince's family, and obviously then she ends up falling in love with various different people and struggling with the original intentions of her goal. This cover is gorgeous. The character illustration, the colors, the gold foiling, it was not printed by Hotarscape, so that means that the spraying on the end papers was actually done properly. It is a repeat of what's on the cover, but it looks good enough that I'm not too upset about that. Character illustrations have some added flair with the gold embossing around the corners, so that was more interesting than what they've done in recent months. And the actual cover is a sort of tie-dye version of the colors that are on the front cover with just gold embossing, and like I said, it's pretty hard to mess that up, so I'm pretty much happy whenever they do gold embossing. And they do have a reversible dust jacket, but it is just a version of the character illustration, and I don't know anyone who would prefer that over this more interesting front cover. This is also reselling for about $30, so not anything more than the subscription fee. Then I did skip the month of September. I don't remember what the book was called, but it was something I was not interested in at all. And I know so many people who skipped. So throughout the summer, we had some really bad picks compared to earlier in the year. Thankfully, they picked it up a little bit toward the end of the year, and we ended up with the Hurricane Wars in October. I know a lot of people were super excited about this because it's a fantasy romance book, and obviously fantasy romance right now is really popular. But then I think people learned that it was a Raylo fanfiction originally, and they got a little bit turned off to it, so I actually have not seen anyone talking about this book. I read a few reviews on Goodreads and they did not seem overwhelmingly positive, but even in the social media sphere, which I try not to pay too much attention to in terms of what I decide to read because it normally ends up being not good for whether I actually like the book or not. I literally have not seen anyone talking about this since it was originally announced, so I will maybe read it at some point, but I have not yet. But I think this ties with Amina for the prettiest book of the year that Fairyloot has done. The cover is absolutely stunning. The kind of watercolor illustration with the gold. Like I said, you can't go wrong with the gold. The end papers, again, it is not a Hotterscape book, so it was actually done properly. It's not just a repeat of the character illustrations on the cover. It is kind of hard to figure out what these like houses on posts are supposed to be, but I'm sure if you've read the book, it probably actually makes sense. Again, the illustrations on the inside are amazing, kind of whimsical watercolor vibes. I think they turned out really well, and they do make me actually want to read the book because they are beautiful, and I think that should be what the point of the Fairyloot special editions is, that they look pretty enough that they entice you to want to read a book that you might not have actually wanted to read. I think that this was a great execution, and it shows that you don't need the reversible dust jacket if you actually make the main cover pretty enough. Then we have the November pick, Sword Catcher by Cassandra Clare, and obviously Cassandra Clare has a huge fan base, so I think people were super excited about this. I am not a huge Cassandra Clare fan, but I decided, since it's her first book since the Mortal Instruments series that's not related to that series, that I would maybe give it a shot. It is like 650 pages though, so I kind of have to be in the right mood for it. And I've seen mixed reviews about the execution of this online, so I'm just going to try to go in with an open mind, considering I have never been a Cassandra Clare fan, but we will see. However, this cover is so ugly. Like, I'm not saying anything bad about the artist. The actual illustrations, of course, are beautiful. Anytime I'm saying that the character illustrations on the front cover are terrible, I'm not talking about the actual artist who did them. Please don't think that. It is just that this is not like an exciting book cover to receive from a special edition box. This is an exciting book cover to receive, but the character, just the normal character illustrations on the front cover do not scream special edition to me. You put that on the end papers. You don't do that for the cover. The actual cover of this book released by the publishers is beautiful. They could have just repeated that and just added some like more foiling and stuff and it would have been perfect, but I don't think anyone is excited about this, and unfortunately it's not a reversible dust jacket. Like, look at how cool the sprayed edges are. This cityscape with lots of shadows and details. I think they could have done something like that for the front cover and everyone would have been a lot more excited. But then they have a repeat of the character illustrations on the inside, which doesn't really make sense to me because if you have character illustrations on the cover, you don't really need more character illustrations on the inside. So overall, I'm just not really happy with the outside cover at all. Then the inside cover, yeah, that looks more like what the actual cover from the publishers looks like, and if they had done something like that on the outside, I think people would have been happier. And unfortunately, because of how terrible the outside of this book is, it's reselling for less than $30, even though special editions of this book from other companies are selling for more than $100. So it really does have to do a lot with the design, whether or not people want to buy the resale edition, and they did not hit the mark with this one. Then finally, we have the December pick, which is also gorgeous, and that is Faybound. I'm currently reading this, so I can't give a very solid review because I'm only on page 61, but I am enjoying it so far. It is about these two elven sisters who end up exiled because of a mistake by one of the sisters, and they end up stumbling into a long abandoned / forgotten Fae civilization, and that's pretty much all I know at the moment because, like I said, I'm only on page 61. The original cover of this book was gorgeous, and all they did was just change the color scheme. I actually think I like this color scheme better, and the gold foiling is amazing. This illustration style is very interesting and different and unique, so I'm happy that they just kept the original cover and then just changed the color. The spraying on the end papers is beautiful. Again, not a Hotterscape book, so it was done properly. It complements the front cover well, but I think this yellow color is kind of weird because the yellow color on the cover is more of a bluish yellow and this is like yellow, so it doesn't totally match, but that's okay. Then the illustrations on the inside, we just get some character illustrations, and I love how They're almost tarot cardy with like the background detail. It's something unique that they haven't done yet this year. And there is a reversible dust jacket, but I think the main cover is so beautiful that I can't see anyone actually using the reversible dust jacket. The gold foiling on the actual cover is, again, so pretty, and I think they really hit it out of the park with this one. This was a pretty hyped up book, at least within the sapphic fantasy enjoyers, so I am actually very happy that they picked this. I was really excited for it to come out, and I was happy that it was a Fairyloot pick. So now that you've seen all of the books from 2023, or almost all of them, now we get to the big question. Is it worth it? And I would say, for me, yes, but only because I don't subscribe to another subscription box. I think if you're subscribing to more than one subscription box and you're getting your fill of special editions through a different box, I don't necessarily think Fairyloot is worth adding. They had some pretty big hits this year, but they also had some pretty big misses, and for next year, I'm looking forward to them refining their picks a little bit. I don't need everything to be like the most hyped up book, but I do want them to stop picking these YA adult crossovers that really just feel like YA. We had a good number of books this year that could have fit into the YA box, and there's a reason why people are subscribing to the adult box and not the YA box. All the books just felt very tropey and overdone, and we had only a few like real adult fantasy picks, in my opinion. They also need to stop using Hotterscape, or at least increase the quality of Hotterscape's sprayed edges, because right now it's just very underwhelming to open the book box and see that many quality issues when it's something that you've paid that much money for. Where I think Fairyloot really becomes worth it is in the fact that you have access to their one-off sale books, and the problem with that though is that they've started doing the books that people actually really want as those trove books, so you'll get like a special code where as a subscriber you can go in and purchase the special edition book. Often that involves waiting in a line that can be like 1 to 2 hours long, which really sucks, especially since it's always in the middle of the workday. So if you work a job where you can't be like on your computer or on your phone for an hour or two refreshing a page, then you're just kind of out of luck, and those are the ones that resell for a lot of money. So you end up with people just going in and buying them and then reselling them, which completely valid. If you have the subscription, you can do whatever you want with it. If that's what you choose to do, more power to you. I'm not going to judge people for doing that. But I do wish that they would put more effort into their monthly box subscription and not always use all of those amazing picks and beautiful designs for the extra. Obviously, they're just trying to make more money from people because they know that you need the subscription in order to buy the books separately during those unique sales, but it just leaves kind of a bad taste in your mouth that you spent all this money on a subscription and the book that you're getting each month is not necessarily like as exciting as the ones that you have to go in and put a ton of effort into getting. So I'm going to keep my subscription for now, but I'm hoping that some of the picks this year are going to be better and that they stop putting character illustrations on the cover. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think of Fairyloot over the past year or so, and bye!